silent, please. Can you also listen a little on the seats for people to have a look at? That's brought it down in the procedure of this committee. Could I also ask that anyone that's speaking, you do have 3 minutes, if you are a member of the public, and I know there's some councillors speaking today, they can have 5 minutes. So go to the microphone, please, or to the edge of the table. Okay. Right, membership of the committee then.
Councillor Firth, I'm substituting for Councillor Cathy Scott.
Thank you.
Finally,
Well, you hear this yourself.
finally what I'm here with Councillor Woollen this afternoon.
Michelle's 5 minutes later.
Is she going to be here? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All the rest of the people, is that okay? Thank you. Minutes of previous meeting. We did then additional record. Is there any comments? Anybody? No. Which is the lobby then. We'll go around and tell Councillor Pinnock. I have to apologise, there's no nameplate on. I'll try to use your councillor names instead of being personal and whatever.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not being lobbied on anything.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson.
No, Chair.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ackroyd. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Councillor Law.
Nothing.
Councillor Hayes.
Nothing either.
Right. I've been lobbied on 10. That's application. That's Alex Mark. I've got information and advice only. And 11. About the series of emails. Well, that's it, I think. Thank you. Admission of the public is in any.
There's no private information.
Reputation of petitions, anybody? Yes? Public question time. I'm going to answer that question, ask that question again. Right. No. Site visit we carried out this morning at 2 sites. That was the one at East Paddock at Daycroft Park, Family Tires, and the one at Cumberland Lane. Local item 9 then local planning authority appeals.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Julia Stedman, team leader in development management. As set out on from page 9 on your agenda, there are 5 appeals to report. 2 of those were allowed. Of those, 1 was an officer decision and 1 was a subcommittee decision contrary to the officer recommendation, and the other 3 appeals were dismissed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Just to make a comment, Chair, on page 14 of Tangerine, application that was allowed, the appeal that was allowed. I brought that to committee. I'm glad I did, because if you look carefully at the appeal, we see that there were some further conditions made, and it should show the value of the process.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Any further comments on that? It's been noted, can we note then? Thank you. On to planning applications then. In item 10, this is demolition of existing building and item of place of worship at Alec Mark 28, Track Road.
Thank you, Chair. Matthias Franklin, Head of Development Management, Kirklees. So, members will recall this application. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with the planning application. So I don't intend to go over the proposed new building or the details around that element. That is unchanged from what members have seen and heard in previous meetings. The reasons that the application was last deferred were specifically around the car park management arrangements for the site when it's operating, with the other uses on the site should the building be developed, and also to look at what is the impact of those trees that are being felled to create the building, but equally what scheme could exist to mitigate their loss. So if we take those in reverse order, starting with the trees then. The trees themselves obviously are very high quality trees. They have a high value at the moment being mature. But what we have is a situation where you can't accommodate the building if you want to trees and vice versa. So what we've devised as a team of officers to assist the applicant wasn't able to prepare a scheme, so officers stepped into that breach. And we've come up with an idea around replacing 2-for-1 ratio in those local streets around the developments or in very prominent public places if you can't get them all in the street. The developer, the applicant rather, has offered the financial contribution of £40,000 which would cover the trees themselves, their installation and maintenance. The council would then likely maintain those trees. And although that you're starting from a development plan position where it's contrary to the policy that the trees are being removed because we don't accept their loss, you do have a scheme in play that officers are satisfied is an acceptable scheme, so you've got a neutral issue there that doesn't therefore warrant a reason for refusal, but it's still contrary. And you can have a scenario where developments are not wholly in compliance with the development plan, and members can weigh that in the round when making decisions. So that issue is before you now as a scheme. Since the report was published, the reason for refusal that related to the car park information, and therefore insufficient to be able to say whether we can successfully accommodate cars around the area and manage the comings and goings, that information did come in after the report was done. Highways officers have had a look at it. I think in summary, there is a way forward that would overcome that reason for refusal with an appropriate planning condition. Is it alright to bring Ryan in? Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair, Ryan in the Highway Development Management. To summarise the highway section of the report updates, following the submission of a site management plan, the proposal is considered acceptable in principle from a highway perspective. Some minor amendments to the submitted plan are in discussion with the applicant's transport consultant. However, it's felt these can be dealt with by a condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to conclude, Chair. So wrapping up those two matters, progress has been made. Conditions are achievable in relation to highways, as Ryan's given you an indication of. There is a Section 106 offer on the table. There is a replacement scheme that can be developed in conjunction with the applicant and the community. So there are mitigations. So you have effectively narrowed the gap from where the issues were. The officer opinion hasn't changed overall on the planning balance. But if you look at the 5 reasons you started as advised to refuse the application on, we're now saying there's 3. So we don't think those reasons are outweighed by the benefits of what's come forward, but clearly, in the planning balance, there is a narrowing of that gap. So it's for members to debate and consider, Chair, and advice.
Jill, you want speakers in now? Mr. Samurai?
Yeah, Chair, can I just make a comment? Our speaker, we've got an order we sent forward. Our first speaker is trying to find a parking space, so we might have to rejig things.
Fine.
Okay, so so speaker number 2 will come first.
Always, sorry.
Muhammad Ali Yunat, and he's one of the
Mr.
residents.
Lomna,
Yeah, Mr. Luna. Yeah, my name, excuse me, my name is Muhammad Ali Luna. I live on Track Road, just exactly opposite the proposed development. I've lived there since 1987, and I've had no issues since the Alikma Centre has been built or developed. The current measures do try to deal with the traffic and highway concerns that my neighbours and I can see partly during our events. However, the additional measures being proposed by the Trust will have a positive impact on the overall flow of traffic, and for not only me and my neighbours, it's also for the general public as well. I cannot emphasise enough the importance of having the fair centre on this site. For me, my family and the whole household and neighbours, it will provide a much needed addition to the services to the community which is at the present. The practical benefit for me will be that I will no longer have to use my car to go and offer prayers to the local masjid. I live with my son, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law comes as well. So we often have to have 2 or 3 cars going to the local masjid. So to have this plan approved, where the centre is just opposite our house, it will save us from making these additional trips. And and obviously it'll encourage us making a walk to the centre. So it's got health reasons as well. Doing a quick calculation as well, not only for myself and my family, there's about 14-15 households that can be affected, and it will save about 14 or 15 journeys for those cars to make to the centre that is about half a mile away. So it will reduce the traffic flow on track road and further down the street. I'm here on not only myself but the adjoining neighbours, and urge the planning committee to look at the application favourably. Thank you.
Can we go to Mr. Rabat then, please?
Well, we're going to actually go to Councillor Habib next.
No, Councillor Speed
Oh, okay,
last.
right.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon everyone. It feels like deja vu for the third time, but I'll try to be succinct. So at the last planning committee meeting, you recall, on the 15th of November, the decision was deferred. And one of the reasons why it was deferred was to enable information to be submitted regarding the potential tree replacement planting scheme. And what I'd also like to do today is touch on, summarise our submission. So, to give you background, the officer has set out the background to the trees, just so that you get the full picture. You will recall last time we explained that there were 22 trees which were at risk in relation to the development, but of which, and I think please note of this, of which 5 were not protected by a TPO, only 4 are protected by the TPO, but they were suppressed trees with limited public amenity value. 4 were in a poor state of condition, and the recommendation from the independent tree consultant was to remove them regardless of this development going through. So in actual reality, we only had 9 trees left, of which we've always said from the start, 4 will be replanted around the Faith Centre itself. Now, following the meeting last time, we had a meeting, a very constructive meeting with the officers where we looked at both those issues on the table. And in attendance was the tree officer, Lee Goddard, and Emily for landscaping. And obviously we were presented with the offer of paying £40,000 towards the council to fund a 2-for-1 replacement, which the colleague there has mentioned to you already. I think we're happy to accept that. However, we would humbly request that the committee do reconsider the amount, given the actual number of trees to be replanted, and actually the financial implications that this will have on enabling us to provide this community facility. I'm going to go up and down a bit, but our summary in terms of our submission is that this has been a very iterative process for us all. We commenced pre-app discussions back in October 2015, and we withdrew the application on the advice of the planning colleagues and resubmitted the application back on 15th of December 2015. During this period, we have tried to address the many concerns raised by planning department and others. Namely, we've relocated the building from its original space. We've reduced the scale of the building on 2 separate occasions. We've addressed the security issues that were highlighted by the police and others. We've strengthened our site management plan and dealing with the... Okay. In essence, we respect that you've got a difficult decision to make. We feel that the public gain from this development far outweighs the harm that's been said. And we'd like you to put your faith in us and make a positive decision today.
Councillor Jamal. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this planning application submitted on behalf of the Indian Muslim Welfare Society based at the Al-Hikmah Centre within my ward, Patrick East. IMWS are a very popular and long-established organisation. They are highly experienced in managing community buildings, controlling traffic around the centre, and working with all sections of the community in delivering training and projects for the disadvantaged and vulnerable sections of the community. Conversations around the role of religion and current affairs are outgrowing importance for this area, and I'm proud that Batley has once again taken a pioneering role in developing this resource. The Al-Hikmah Centre has made space for prayer and reflection room, which has outgrown its current demand. Currently, it offers a great space, encouraging people in pursuing development of their faith, promoting understanding and respect amongst members who worship, private prayer, personal reflection, as well as receiving pastoral support. I'm keen to support communities that are keen to raise their aspirations, as well as supporting the Al-Hikmah Centre to create a new space that will host all regular scheduled faith activities. Through faith, we can have the courage to worship and learn from others to grow in our diversity, to gain inspiration from the way other communities are doing things, and to start to think more creatively about engagement across difference. I have full confidence that the committee, with strong faith and leadership, will give participants a chance to meet with and question faith leaders from all walks of life to enrich their understanding of how faith can influence and drive leadership in our world. The Al-Hikmah Centre Committee have gone to great lengths to meet planning regulations. They have worked very hard with officers and the community to ensure residents in the area suffer minimum disruption, if at all. An already busy building has put volunteers in place who will manage parking on site and on street during events and functions, which may generate a large parking demand. The committee are proposing on-street parking that may occur on Track Road is restricted by the use of temporary waiting restrictions by using cones during the time a large event is taking place. This will be supported by volunteers from the community and the committee. Car park attendants will be provided when large events and functions are held. The centre currently manages their parking, which they will continue to build as their user capacity increases. I believe the organisation has met or tried to meet all the planning rules and recommendations. I'm particularly pleased that within the plans there will be dedicated facility for women, which as far as I'm aware is not available anywhere within the Batley area. Therefore, Chair, I propose the Planning Committee approve their application.
Councillor Luna, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to hear that this application has come ahead of renewals and far from what it has been before. Like mentioned before, there's quite a few issues that needed to come through, and the communications with the officers, the applicant has managed to make some really good changes and see as much as possible solutions come forward to come here. We've come across to having two main issues which were put towards the committee last time. One being the issues around the trees, and I'm really glad to hear that some headway has been made and a possible solution has been agreed upon by both the applicant and the officers. In terms of the parking, so let's be clear, I'm one of the councillors for Batley, and I have lived most of my life in Batley. I've attended a lot of events, I mean, more than I want to even remember, in the premises itself. And I believe having the facility that they're offering now will just be very advantageous for the community itself, and the fact that the parking site management plan that's been offered, and the fact that the applicants are saying that they will again speak to officers and come up with possible further solutions to make sure that those issues that they still have in terms of possibly an officer having a dedicated personnel managing the off-street parking kind of thing, if that's something that's what the officers need to do, from what the communications I've seen have with the applicants, they're quite willing to do that. So I do appeal to the committee here that with all the information and the additional information put forward to you guys, and I hope that you accept this application now. Thank you.
He's not here, but I have his script. I'm happy to read it on his behalf, if that's okay with the council.
Yeah.
So, as I said earlier, at the last meeting, the application was deferred, and one of the other key reasons for its deferral was to allow further highway information to be submitted, particularly in relation to how the various uses will interact. So on the 4th of December, we held a meeting at City Centre, which included a number of representatives from planning, highway, trees and landscaping. And at the meeting, we as the applicant had Sanderson acting as our consultant on all the highway issues. The meeting addressed the concerns expressed at the planning committee on the 15th of November. And following our meeting, we sent an email setting out the key points to address back to the council on the 7th of December. And on the 14th of December, we submitted our full site management plan to the council. I hope you've had a chance to have a look at that. The key changes and improvements set out in that plan are as follows. Any large events will be published in advance in the community newsletter and website and other avenues to ensure that this is happening. Car park attendants will be present at large events and at peak periods. Street marshals will be patrolling the track road and Walkley Road during parade times and other large events. Cones will be placed in front of the Faith Centre. Cones will be placed at both Thorncliffe Road and on Track Road. I think all of the above specific measures are designed to monitor, control and manage the smooth flow of traffic in and around the centre. So in summary, we feel that we have fully cooperated with the officers and introduced improved and enhanced measures to address the planning committee's concerns expressed last time. Thank you.
Members?
As far as venues are concerned, I've got a dear friend of mine who's got a venue in Bradford, sort of neighbourhood in Bradford. They have 10 staff, parking staff, on the parking spaces, stops traffic for 2 hours at a time, similar size to what being planned here. This is, I mean, the neighbourhood's at Way Track Lane, I mean, it is, it's a small road. My concerns for the parking and the traffic and the inconvenience of it is massive. And that's just one of the issues I've got with this building as far as it being imposing. It's too big for the area. It's inappropriate for the area. But the parking, if that's what we're boiling it down to, I think it's uncontrollable with the parking. I don't think it will ever be controlled on a small, not even a B road, in effect up there on track road. It's just an inappropriate building in an inappropriate place as far as the venue is concerned. And that's just looking at it in the cold light of day in context of what the ongoing objections are. I mean, I've got many more running through my mind. But if we're just concentrating on those, I see no reason to change TPO's listed buildings being pulled down and walls for a building that's out of context with its area.
It's just on parking, or cars in general. From what I remember last time, we had issues with Kirklees parking, we had issues with parking on highways, we had issues about a management plan. I would say today that we're absolutely okay with what's being proposed. That's highways and Kirklees parking within inside the grounds.
Brilliant, Chair. The management plan that's been submitted is acceptable in principle, but there are 1 or 2 tweaks that we need to discuss in terms of the monitoring, the internal management of the car park, and the need for some possible permanent weighting restrictions subject to the results of the monitoring period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 3 reasons for refusal here, but the one I want to focus on is the second one, which is to do with the trees. And yes, I understand that a scheme has been put forward and provisionally agreed. However, I'd like members to look at page 42, paragraph 10:16, where it's quite clear to me, at any rate, that these trees are of extremely high value, not only as trees,
And this is going to sound like splitting hairs in a way. Not only as trees, but as habitat. And of course I realise that trees are habitats anyway, but the implication of what's written here is that this habitat is of extremely high quality. And I am not convinced that a scheme to replant trees in other places can possibly reproduce the habitat, not for about 20 years. That's the problem. And whilst we have an application which of whose principle I'm in great agreement with, I understand what they're trying to do and I applaud it. But to me, the building's in the wrong place, and a different scheme needs to be put forward that does not include dealing with these trees. There is another issue actually, which one of the speakers talked about only 9 trees. Well, that's not what's in here. Mentions 33, I think. So I'm just right. Okay, well, more than 9 anyway. So I think we need to, as far as the trees goes, we need to think about that report. I think Councillor Hall said this, that the report that was here previously. What is it? The report that was here previously, it did say it was 22 trees, but only 9 of them had any value.
Oh right, well it's that's where that's coming from.
And the caveat report actually there is some emissions in the caveat report, I have to say. It gives you a value of £285,000. It took into consideration all the trees and definitely the ones that were either got some infestation or whatever.
I take all that on board. I'm still emphasising the point that I made, and it's still one of the reasons for refusal, simply because of the quality of the habitat, and I would suspect that it's actually very difficult to reproduce that if you spread the trees out in other places. I mean, normally we would do that, but it seems to me that even given the state of some of the trees, the habitat is of such high quality that we're going to lose it.
Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. At previous committees, I've set out my opinion on the actual principle of this building, and yes, I do support it where it is and the scale it is and its site. I did have issues about the trees. If you remember, the very first thing I said when we were on the planning process was what's going to happen to these trees and what kind of off-site accommodation can we make. I take into account Councillor Pinnock's comments on habitat. I think if we were minded to go against officers' recommendation, I would hope that we would do our best through delegation to try and get officers to get that habitat recreated. And that's what I thought would happen with that. I was also, this is a fine art, it is, there's no way around that. I think what's sticking me towards going against officer recommendation is albeit late arrival of the site management plan. If that hadn't been there today, I would have struggled to actually go against officer recommendation. It's clear. So I think that's my opinion at the moment. I'll see what the plan says.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. As the secretary is could come in and balance one. So I spoke with him and at the same time I'm on the motion to approve.
As has been pointed out, this is one of them, isn't it?
going back to the issue of the tree, one thing that concerns me is the fact that not only the habitat of the trees is well established, if we plant double the amount somewhere else, that's going to have an impact on air quality, because those trees in that area will be absorbing an awful lot of pollution. We know we've got problems nationally as well as locally with rising air pollution, and if we plant some trees, I would want some conditions that they are the biggest trees we can possibly plant to start getting some of that air quality coming back in. Because if we can't plant little ones, by the time they have an impact on air quality, sadly, most of the site around this table have been long gone. So I think that if we're going to go for this, the trees need to be as big as we can possibly afford, and 10.32 says we get the money before we take any trees down, so we can guarantee to replace them. So I would think I would probably support it on those issues, on those grounds, that the trees are as big as we can possibly get planted, and if possible, in some of several together without scattering out. You don't get the same impact.
Thank you. Councillor Fair.
Following from my colleagues' comment, Person's Park is very close, and I'm just wondering whether that habitat, the number of trees collectively, all obviously like many women, can be created somewhere in Person's Park. I don't know whether or not is aware of that number. Obviously not, but I would like that to be certainly considered at the very least. It's only next door, basically.
Yeah.
We did consider the park. We spoke to the parks people about that. There was I think the issue is that there isn't really capacity to put them there, but the surrounding streets have got space to put them in. There are some other pockets as well that we can put those trees in. So we did look at that, because as you say, it's next door. But I think the idea was to try and move them into the communities so they're very visually prominent. Trees on the park, and then also if we can create grouped areas as well in those public vantage points, and clearly as they mature they become very valuable in terms of the cost associated to the trees that you lose eventually, though these trees will potentially exceed the value of these trees.
I don't want to be negative, but to find these spaces around Track Road, top of Burswood for 44 trees and big trees, you're going to struggle to start with.
I think we were looking at the surrounding residential streets, certainly. That's the point. We want to get involved with the developer and the community to say, do you want these trees here? So there's a lot of collaboration and agreement. The developer will be facilitating those discussions with residents, and officers would then deliver the trees and highways.
Can we just leave that there just for the time being? Because I would like to come back on this, but if anybody else wants to speak.
I just wanted to make a point really, just to know that when this application first came to committee, the thing that concerned me the most was the impact on the street scene, and how that would affect residents in the area. And this application hasn't actually got any objections as far as I'm aware of. And the whole point of having a planning committee as well is to give people the opportunity to speak, because they are obviously residents in the area, they know the area better than me, for example, who doesn't know the area. Had this application gone through first time, it could well be refused, and it may get refused now, I don't know. But it has been worth being deferred, getting everything in place, because now we have, a clearer picture of, what's going on. And I just wanted to say, we do listen, and there is a point to this planning committee, and is to air all the grievances out to the open. And I'm happy to actually second your Mr. Councillor Andrews.
Can I just make a few comments? And I have to say this, what you just said is exactly right. And I was lobbied, and I've said that I've been lobbied on this application. And on every occasion I've passed the members of the Mosque Committee back onto offices to try to discuss and ensure there's a way forward. And this has been going on quite a long time. And every single time that it's come to this committee, we have discussed it and we tried to get down to a decision, if you like, that is balanced. Yeah, I take on board what you say, and it really is fine balanced, this one. But I can respond in such a way is that the one that we had on Sabaltown, and this is picking up on your point, was it's that community that's going to have that issue. And if that community are accepting of that issue, then we should be accepting of their decision. And none of them have objected. And I think that's important too. We've taken into consideration, and I agree totally. We asked for the traffic management plan. The traffic management plan has come back. We deferred it on two occasions previously. Every single time it's been deferred, it's come back with an upgrade to that information. I agree with you totally about creating an habitat, and Councillor Firth is real about. I think we should be doing that. We should be saying to our officers, I certainly don't. I wouldn't prefer these trees to be planted in the streets. We need to find somewhere where we can recreate that habitat that's there. And certainly they should be semi-mature trees. And they shouldn't be whips or whatever you want to be, whatever you want to call them. I think it's important to do that. But I'm sympathetic to the views of these people because we have every occasion they try to facilitate them changes. And I have to say this, our officers haven't always been that helpful for us. They've changed the configuration, they've changed it all the way around, and in actual fact they've done the best they possibly can. And I think it's a better application now than what it was previously. And given all the other things, given all the other additions and conditions that are likely to impose upon them, I think I could actually go for it on this now. But unless there's any other further speakers, there's a recommendation from the committee, from Councillor seconded, that we accept this recommendation with the conditions that was, that the mature trees, we try to create a specific habitat for these trees, and that the traffic management plan is accepted. Can I just ask you about the traffic management plan? We fully agree to all the traffic management plan that's been submitted.
It's agreed in principle. There's just one or two tweaks in terms of timescales for monitoring.
Can we delegate that to somebody?
Yes.
So that's traffic management that's subject to delegation.
Can I just, before we take a vote, Chair, can I just check, because there are no conditions listed here as a recommendation for refusal. I don't know whether it would be possible to not defer it, but delay the decision until
the conditions
have been approved by the committee, or at least the committee has had a chance to look at the conditions.
I think we're delegating to conditions to the officers.
Yes,
actually.
Yeah. Well,
I think officers are taking away from it what we
that's fair enough. But I do think that if there are any issues that result from that, then it should come back to us.
We can
share them when issues arise.
Before the decision notice is
before the decision notice
before the decision notice is sent out, we can actually send a copy of the conditions. Is that okay?
Just follow that up, and Andrew, I think is I'm concerned about the trees, as long as the basic conditions somewhere. What you said in your narrative about creating that because you 44 trees, and so I suppose we are numbering those trees.
I think it's important to say if you want semi-mature, the money that we've suggested, £40,000, which we said would be, we suggested we could take in phases, the developer picking up his issues. You wouldn't get 44 semi-mature trees for £40,000. You can have £40,000 and carve it how you think is appropriate in trees. That might be a way to delegate it.
Can I just say that there's an halfway house here, because 9 of the 22 trees are the only ones that are likely to be saved. So if we accept £40,000, we've got more than what.
You've got a meaningful contribution to deliver a scheme in the locality.
And we'll create some habitat for that, but that's up to you.
Okay.
Can I say, okay, the sums agreed and mature trees, there may be further opportunities in the area to plant trees. But it's a tree planting scheme that we have at Kirklees, and I'm sure with the amount of volunteers that when they're not looking after traffic, they can perhaps plant some trees around the area.
Right, do you over a second to accept this application?
So, in terms of the actual recommendation itself, is it something along the lines of delegating the approval of the application and the issuing of the decision notice to the Head of Strategic Investment to secure a Section 106 agreement, so referring to your paragraphs 10.30 to 10.32 on page 45. So the planning obligations set out there.
And impose all the conditions.
Yeah.
And impose all the conditions and let us see the conditions before the decision notice go out. Is that okay? Right, all those in favour? Anyone against? Application is approved. Thank you. Agenda item 11. Correction of Woollen, vehicle parliamentarians.
Members visited the site this morning. The site forms part of the wider beach farm development, which has recently undergone redevelopment, with the original agricultural buildings demolished and replaced with a residential development of detached, semi-detached and terraced dwellings. The site is located within the Five Tires conservation area. Commissioners sought the erection of one detached dwelling to the north-east of the wider residential development. The dwelling will be 2 stories in scale with an L-shaped layout, a parking and turning area to the front and amenity space to the side and rear. Materials of construction are proposed to be natural stone with stone slate roof tiles. The application was submitted some time ago and more recently amended and additional plans have been received. The applicant has submitted a section drawing indicating the proposed relationship with existing residential development to the south-west of these properties here.
Could you speak up a bit, Sarah?
Sorry. And not that. Sorry. And not that which members saw on site today. The footprint and layout of this dwelling does differ from others previously approved and built on the remainder of the beach farm site. However, since the time of the outline application, which was approved in 2013, this dwelling and its neighbour, for which there is a pending application, were always considered to be as such. This has been considered to be an acceptable way forward as a mixture of house types is how the site was envisaged to be developed. Officers therefore consider that the design and scale of the proposed building does on the whole adhere to the principles established at outline stage and will preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area as well as the wider development as a whole in accordance with development policies. With respect to the impact on residential amenity, the nearest neighbouring dwellings to be affected by the proposed development are 5 and 6 Manor Drive as indicated on the section here. The separation distance between the main elevation of the proposed dwelling and the rear elevation of numbers 5 and 6 would be approximately 20 metres with an indirectly facing relationship. In assessing previous applications, for the wider redevelopment, distances less than those recommended within policy B12 UDP were considered acceptable within the site in order to reflect the historic fabric of the village. As such, the relationship between the proposed dwelling and numbers 5 and 6 would accord with this context. Notwithstanding the situation on site, where levels have been altered, submitted section drawing demonstrates the proposed relationship with numbers 5 and 6 Manor Drive, and this indicates that the finished floor level of the proposed dwelling would be lower than that of number 6. Due to the relatively indirect orientation, position to the north-east of those properties, and the separation distance I've already referred to, officers consider that on balance the proposed development would not have a significant detrimental impact upon the amenity of adjacent occupiers. Access to the sites would be gained from Deer Croft, as seen on the site visit this morning, with a new private access road created to serve the dwelling. Internally there will be adequate off-street parking and turning provision. Now representations are being received in relation to the amended and additional plans, and the concerns raised are addressed in the report. To summarise, the proposals are considered by officers to have no significant detrimental impact on visual or residential amenity, highway safety, the character of the conservation area, or adjacent green belt, and the officer recommendation is to delegate approval of the application in accordance with the recommendations set out in the updates. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask you just to, before I go to the speakers, just to explain what we said this morning about the finished floor levels? Should we accept this application about them being reduced as to where they are now?
Yeah, so what is on the side is what members saw on the site visit is not what
Because there were some members that were on the site.
Yeah, so it would be if members were to agree with the recommendation, that would be in accordance with the plan shown here and not as seen on site.
Jane Faulkner, you are again here.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Jane Faulkner and I'm a resident of Farnham Tyres. This application is one of the two remaining sites on the still unfinished beach farm development. Both applications were submitted in 2014 and neither of them have been approved. Without the application being approved, the builder started work on this site in August by adding 1 metre concrete pipework on top of the inspection chambers. He then moved all the waste that had been deposited on the site from beach farm development around these pipes, which increased the height of the site by just over 1 metre. He then proceeded to dig footings for a house which he infilled with concrete to establishment. This height increase would have meant that the house was built on a platform which would have had a detrimental effect on the conservation area and impacted on the openness of the green belt surrounding it. After intervention from Kirklees enforcement officers, the work on the site was halted, as there have now been 2 new plans added to the 2014 application, but there have been no supporting documents added to this application to state how the site is going to be reduced to its original level. As far as I'm aware, there were no concerns raised over either of the 2 remaining unapproved applications on Beach Farm at their original height level, and I'm sure that Kirklees Planning, along with local residents and indeed the developer, are keen to get these 2 final applications approved and developed so that Beach Farm will finally be completed after over 5 years of disruption for the existing local residents. Having read the case officer's submission to the committee, I note that there is a recommendation for various conditions to be attached to this application. There appears to be no condition requiring remedial work to be done to restore this site to its original level. I would therefore respectfully request that this application is refused and a new application is submitted along with all the appropriate supporting documents, including information about restoring the site to its original height level. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Mary Farmley and my home and that of my daughter living next door back onto this site. Firstly, let me state that we have no objection in principle to a house being built on this site. The problem we are facing is the fact that all the waste material created by the construction of the beach farm development has been deposited on this East Paddock site, resulting in the following issues. Firstly, instead of clearing this rubble, the builder merely raised 2 inspection chambers by 1 metre immediately over our garden walls and then levelled the waste, creating an artificial platform. The natural level of the ground was approximately 7 feet below the top of our garden wall. It is now 3 feet 8 inches below, and that is before any surfacing materials, pavers, etc. are added. As this is the vehicular access to the property, we are likely to end up with vehicles parked up to and overlooking our wall, whereas before the raising of the land we would have been unaware of them. Secondly, the workman excavating the footings, which are now in situ, informed us that he had had to dig them to a depth of 9 feet in places to get through the rubble. This clearly illustrates how much rubble is still on the site. Number 3, the land to the east of the site, adjacent to the rear walls of Manor Road properties, is now almost as high as these walls, and it is the builder's intention to build a retaining wall which will compromise access to the main drains from the Beach Farm estate. According to the case officer's notes to committee, any retaining wall would be the subject of a separate planning application. If it was, and was approved, what about access to the drains? If it was refused, how will all this rubble be held back from the Manor Road garden walls? There has been no report from the Conservation Officer since the 2014 application, and I put it to the committee that this is not the same site it was then. It has a high shelf at the northern end of the site overlooking paddocks and open countryside, whereas prior to the dumping of the rubble, the land sloped gently down to these paddocks. Number 5, this property does not follow the rest of the Beach Farm development, as each property is built on the natural level of the land. This is to be a very large property and will have a very overbearing effect on all adjacent properties built at this unnatural height. We will suffer loss of privacy to our garden and all windows to the rear of our homes. I respectfully request that this application be approved only on condition that the land is restored to its original level. Thank you very much for allowing me to put my views.
Councillor Bilal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues. I've been approached by quite a number of residents of Ballantyre about this matter. And it's an unusual application in my mind in several respects. And I'll be arguing that it ought to be rejected here and now. I wish to make clear that I accept that the principle of building on this site is established, and I don't object to building per se. It's the details of this application that I'm to have issue. The application dates back to 2014 and is related to other applications from 2011 onwards, covering a larger area in the ownership of the current applicant, Ratcliffe Developments. In the intervening years, the topography of the plot has changed dramatically with the deposition of builder's rubble, and it now stands on a raised platform on plinth, which is approximately 1.2 metres, or put in old money, higher than the 2014 ground level. I must conclude this application also includes an implicit request for retrospective permission in this regard. A lot of civil engineering work and no permission. Section 10 of the Oxford report is a number of salient observations, including consideration of the context of existing buildings at 10.5, the suggestion that the proposal would preserve and enhance the setting of the conservation area at 10.6, and notes that it is significantly larger at 10.8 than other houses on the site. This section then states that hard landscaping and boundary treatments would harmonise with the wider development at section 10.9. And note that views from the green belt and taking the proposed development in the foreground at 10.11. So it's going to be an intrusive feature adjacent to the green. In my view, the proposed design would, far from preserve the conservation area, present a discordant appearance, with the house uniquely in that area being on a pronounced plinth, which itself does not harmonise with the wider settlement. The report accepts that this house would be a dominant feature. I think these facts are of themselves sufficient to refuse the application, but there are other considerations
from Woollen. The pothole surface of Field Lane, and it's been repaired a couple of days ago before your visit, is a matter of grave concern for residents, and condition 11 in this application relates to Field Lane highway work, so what is actually classed as a driveway. At section 1022, the report states that the applicant, Ratcliffe Development, is, and I quote, still the owner of the land, and then concludes that there is thus no need for the new application. I've had sight of an email from John Radcliffe, writing on behalf of this applicant company, dated 17th of December, that's this week. This email relates to maintenance of Field Lane, and Mr. Radcliffe is very clear, saying, we are finishing our final house around the end of February 2019. When this work is complete, we will have fulfilled our obligations under the planning consent, and ongoing maintenance will not be our responsibility. We have sold the two large plots, that's the east and the west paddocks, and will have no ongoing role in the construction of these houses. And I think that's an important point. Clearly, the current applicant is not the owner of the plot, by his own statement. And this in itself calls into question just how condition 11 of this application regarding Field Lane could be enforced against the new owner. Given that the approved finish for Field Lane is of granular material, it's very likely that construction traffic to both the east and west paddocks will be very damaging. There's a clear likelihood that existing residents would be saddled with very expensive repairs, which may not be recoverable from the conditions of this application. The problem is that the existing condition 11 relates to the completion of building works on a site developed by Radcliffe. Whilst the subject of this application is no longer owned or operated by that developer, there's the potential for Radcliffe to argue that their work is completed, so they have no further responsibility for Field Lane, on the one hand, and the current owner of the plot or plots to argue that it should not be subject to a condition which covers work done by a different entity and what would be a different site. So creating problems here. Further, a single house application would not be likely to generate Section 106 liabilities, although the report does refer to Section 106. And I suggest that the list of conditions attached to this application is actually largely redundant. So I submit, Mr. Chairman, the only equitable way to proceed is to reject this application and encourage the new plot owner to present his own detailed application on the conditions as they are now. Thank you.
On site.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I'm Tom Sykes from Automatic Architects, acting as the agent on behalf of John Radcliffe Developments and Farmers Tires. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying the current application drawings are dated to the principles established as part of the previously approved outline application in 2013. We feel the position and design of the proposed property at Daycroft is in keeping with the surrounding beach farm estate and the proposal to preserve and enhance the setting of the conservation area. There have been a number of concerns raised within the representations regarding the finished floor level of the proposed property. We can confirm the level will be built in line with the levels indicated on the previously approved outline application and also the proposed drainage strategy, which form part of the wider beach farm planning approvals. Due to concerns regarding loss of privacy, an additional section was requested by the case officer to clearly demonstrate the proposed location on site and its relationship to 5 and 6 Manor Drive. As you can see, the proposed levels is 700mm lower compared to the adjacent existing properties on Manor Drive. Due to the indirect orientation of the property, in addition to the separation distance and lower floor level, the proposed development will not have a significant detrimental impact upon the amenity of the adjacent occupiers. We understand that there has been some recent construction activity on site, but I do want to reassure members that the development will be delivered in line with the submitted application drawings. And I must emphasise that the application should not be judged on the current plans rather than the suspected unauthorised works on site. There have also been concerns raised regarding the boundary treatment within the development. The proposed plans clearly indicate the type and height of walls to be used. The
The proposed boundaries will be constructed in dry stone walling which maintain the traditional appearance of the surrounding development and that found within the conservation area. Details of these boundaries will also require formal approval by planners as part of the discharge of conditions application if you were to approve their scheme. I hope the sufficient information has now been provided for members to aid their decision to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start with a question? Do the original plans indicate the height above Woollen Estate of the finished floor level?
Through you, Chair, the original plans show the floor plan elevations. There isn't a section that there is here. In the plan.
So there is no figure above OD? No. Can I ask a direct question? Do you think there should be?
Through you, Chair, this is why we asked for this section during the course of the application. Like I say, the original application, when it was submitted in 2014, it did just comprise of the elevations and the floor plans. As negotiations have gone through and in recent concerns raised by members of the public because of the change in levels, this is when we requested the full section details.
I think this is important. Mr. Sykes, could I ask you questions?
Yeah, of course you can.
You made a statement there.
Yeah.
That the finished floor levels would be exactly the same as what was on the drawings.
Correct.
If we hadn't got them finished floor levels, how can it be the same? How can we check?
Well, because we've indicated the floor level on the drawing, so we're basically saying to you that the site will be constructed to the finished floor level on that drawing.
On this drawing, yeah. But you said it was relevant to the previous drawings.
Yeah. So
there were no finished floor levels.
Sorry, I meant the previous drawings as part of the outline.
Right.
The outline approval, we did have the size of the dwelling on there and the finished floor levels of those properties on there.
On the original outline, there's a drainage layout which shows floor levels, finished floor levels, but sorry, in terms of consequent expression, the plans and elevations that submitted for this plot didn't include a section.
Right.
That's why I was responding to that.
Did the original drawings include the finished floor levels?
There is a layout. On the outline, it was indicated with paddocks.
Right.
There was a separate drainage layout which indicated floor levels. That's been approved as discharge conditions and indicated.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not trying to trip you up here. This is important because people have said that it's the raising of the as a plinth. Yeah. If the finished floor levels were indicated, said they were a metre previously, and they're going to be a metre now, then there's no difference, is there? If they're now going to be a metre and 700, which is what we thought today, then there is a difference, and if we raise 700. So, what's the finished floor levels? I'll ask you again.
What I was referring to initially was the original plan submitted for this full application, the floor plan examinations for that didn't include a section like this. That's what in response to the question. It just showed that was during the floor plan elevation.
And the drainage plans did show.
There was a drainage, that was submitted for discharge conditions, and that showed levels that demonstrated here.
Right. That's right.
Sorry, could I just come back on that? Because it does seem to me that one of the ways we can make sure that the finished floor levels are where they ought to be is to say it should be so many metres above OD, above the ordnance data. And I just wonder whether that should be included in condition. Because I think that's important. That's all something similar to is the only way of ensuring that we get the finished floor level where it is supposed to be and not somewhere above it.
Mine was just a question of clarity, really. I'm getting quite confused. What I want to know is is the roof height going to be 70 centimetres above the original roof height because of the platform? Yeah. The overall height of the building compared to the overall height of it before. I mean, I know the building's going to be the same size, but what I'm saying is the height of the roof now going to be about a metre higher than it was originally?
Through you, Chair.
Just let me ask.
Sorry. I'll just refer you to the section as shown here. So this is what is before members to consider, so that it indicates the ridge height there in relation to the nearest adjacent properties.
Yeah, but what was it previously?
In terms of the overall height of the building, that is the same as the original elevation.
So it's the same as what it was?
No,
but that's the relationship.
You just said the
with
overall height of the building. That doesn't mean to me
in
that the
terms
roof is at the same level. That means to me that the height of the building is still the same. It still could be the same there or there. What I want to know is the roof height higher than it was originally from ground level.
Yeah. I think to try and clarify, in terms of the finished floor levels we've got shown on this section here, this corresponds with the drainage plans that were submitted for your discharge of your outline application. So this, like I said, but then what's been built on site has increased the floor levels. So this isn't to agree what's been built on site, this is to go back to what was agreed to have, the drainage of the outline.
There's no difference. There's no difference.
They're going to have to excavate something on site, aren't they, to bring the level down?
That's the point I'm trying to raise.
They're going to have to have a
To clarify, Chair, the site will be put back to what it was. The rubble will be removed because as part of our condition, before we approve this, if we approve it, they will have to lower the whole site by roughly a metre. Am I correct, Chair?
Yes.
I think that's the evidence.
Councillor Lawson.
Through you, Chair, a relatively straightforward question. We mentioned boundary treatments and stone walls. When we were on site, it occurred to me that if there was extra material against those dry stone walls on one side rather than another, if that was fresh material, had there been any retaining walls included, I just wanted to ask you whether that would be an ordinary consideration should those levels be different when it comes to really that boundary treatment.
It's the same answer because the levels are going to be reduced, so it would be exact.
So that would be
yes.
Yes. The removal of all
it's the same answer.
Straightforward, as I said, Chair.
Sorry. Anybody else?
Can I move the recommendation, Chair? Conditional on the whole site being dropped by a metre, and that will make the original application compliant.
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying to nail it, absolutely nail it down. I wonder whether officers think that a reference to an absolute measure, in other words, the height above ordnance section, is necessary to put it in the condition so that we make absolutely sure that it's where it should be.
It isn't. We can't enforce that. We can't enforce that because what you've got to enforce is what the levels were there previously and what they're going to be here. So that means that they're going to be the exact same.
Through your chair.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Because we've already accepted it. Okay.
If members are happy with the section shown here, which like I say corresponds with the drainage one, if they're happy with that section there, the level shown there, we can condition it to time to the level from there. So we've got something as a point of reference on site.
Right, I know you've moved in second of this. There's been a couple of other things here that's outstanding as far as I'm concerned, and that is the completion of these two properties. When these two properties are complete, and we're being led to believe by Councillor Ahmed, they're in a different ownership. They cannot, I would suggest that we condition that they cannot be actually taken into habitation without that Field Lane being completed. The work to Field Lane being completed. And we can do that as a condition.
Right to it behind the road.
Yeah.
To
Is that okay? And the other thing is, there's a couple of other things, one of which I mentioned this morning, and that was about the roof slates. And let me tell you, they are not proper York stone roof slates there. They're not. They're concrete. And I know we asked for concrete, for proper York stone slates on them properties. I want our officers to look into that. I want to make sure definitely that these two that are going to be built on it have got York stone slates on there. But I want our officers, our enforcement officers, to look into that. Because we asked for that. I know we couldn't get them on the ones that was completed on the other side of the development, but we asked for them on the others. And that was purely because when we took the second visit, we realised that they put imitation slate on that. Or something different. And that's that one. And I just really want to answer Jamie's question, or was it yours, Mr. Brown, about the retaining wall. Should that be reduced by metre? There should be no need for retaining walls. There should be no need for that. As I say, I've got a lot of sympathy. This has gone back quite a long time, hasn't it? We've gone back ages on this, and we split the applications up so as they didn't. I know someone mentioned the 106s as well. We split the application so they didn't pay the 106s as well. So with them conditions, I'd like to go to the vote if that's okay. Is everyone okay? Right. Is that okay then? Right, we've got a mover and a seconder to accept officers' recommendations with the conditions. All those in favour?
Yeah. Can you put begrudgingly excited now?
Applications approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, tonight at 12, this is our application of excellent residential development to 0 every day.
No indicative site layout plan has been submitted, nor has an indicative number of units been suggested by the applicant. This application has been brought to committee as the site is larger than 0.5 hectares in size. site is in the Greenbelt in the Unitary Development Plan and in the Emerging Plan. It's a vacant site but does still have buildings, as members would have seen on site today, as well as hard surfaces and a telecommunications mast which is on the north-west boundary of the site. The site is not in a conservation area and there are no listed buildings immediately adjacent to the site. There are no trees of significant size or age within the site. However, tree preservation orders protect several trees to the northwest and southwest outside the site. This is a view from the south. Members would have seen a Cumberworth Lane bends and runs uphill on the approach to the site. And this is a view from the north. These are fairly old photos when the site was still in occupation. To the west of the site is the relatively recent Bromley Park residential development, which is accessed from Cumberworth Lane. Other land and buildings surrounding the site are in agricultural and residential use. In terms of land use and the principle of development, the scheme is considered acceptable. Residential use of the site was previously accepted by the council. The site has constraints, but there is no reason why these can't be satisfactorily addressed at the reserve master stage when a detailed design is brought forward. The site is in the Greenbelt. Paragraph 1.145 of the MPPF lists the kind of development that, as exceptions, can be regarded as appropriate in the Greenbelt. These include redevelopment of previously developed land, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than the existing development. Now, the existing buildings on the site rise to up to 10 metres in height, not including the telecommunications mast. These and the mast, the boundary treatments and the hard surfaces already impact upon the openness of the Greenbelt. It's accepted that a residential development here can be carefully designed so it would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. What that development would look like in terms of layout, heights, materials, etc. will be considered later at reserve matter stage. Access is a reserve matter but is likely to be taken from Cumberworth Lane. The length of required visibility displays will be considered at reserve matter stage once speed surveys have been carried out. And just so members are aware, the applicants were invited to carry out speed surveys before this meeting, but they weren't able to as roadworks were being carried out on Cumberworth Lane. Residential development here can be designed so it would not cause unacceptable neighbour amenity, ecological, tree or drainage impacts. These are all matters to be considered further in detail at reserve matter stage. No objections have been received from residents or from the Denbigh Parish Council. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, including conditions regarding affordable housing, public open space, education, highways and drainage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. As you'll be aware, an outline application for residential development on this brownfield site was approved with all matters reserved in 2015. The Council considered that a form of layout and scale would be achievable so that the proposed development could in future be assessed in relation to the impact on Greenbelt openness, as Mr Grayson has said. We'll be starting the ball rolling with a pre-application submission early in the new year to specifically debate housing numbers, layout, etc. As Mr Grayson said, the site's in a good location, close to the centre of Denbigh, easy walking distance to shops, services, bus routes and the train station. No objections from members of the public, internal council departments or external consultees. The application was submitted in good time prior to the 2015 permission expiring last month. And this application is identical to the previous one approved. As there have been no site-specific or policy changes that would change the view this development is appropriate in principle, we hope that members will approve this application once again. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to propose we accept the recommendation subject to conditions as laid out in the report today. Sorry about that. Excellent 500 yards from it's derelict site, brownfield.
Councillor Lawson. the effect on the game lot and the legislation with regard to the game lot. And I think I said this on committee on yesterday. I'd like to see any development that's going to build there follow the exact same footprint as the building that's on there now, because otherwise it will have an effect on the game lot. I think we could condition that. We have a possibility, there's a possibility of us conditioning that, and I think it should be normal for everybody that's living up there to say that there's nothing of a greater development, but everybody's accepted that it's in Greenbelt, but there should be no greater development than the one that's actually there already. And it's within our gift to be able to do that. So I don't know whether members are supportive of that or not.
Yes, I would agree with that, because the problem, it seems to me, is that there is hard surfacing on most of the sites, and I think what Councillor Kane's condition is designed to stop is any developer assuming that because it's hard surface, it's therefore fair game for the development. So I would certainly support that.
It is not development,
only where the development is not the hard surfacing.
Exactly right.
I was just studying the last how we just renewing the original approval, and because that was 46 pounds.
This is for the
right one.
This is for the new application. Sorry?
As we discussed on the bus this morning, when we come to assessing the reserve matters on the site, we would need to be taking into account what's set out in the MPA in terms of the development should have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than existing development. So that's something that we would be assessing how reserve matters, and Nick is Victor set out in the part as well.
We are sending a message to the developer that is what we would be wanting to see. Outstanding is not development.
Can I ask you, if we constrain any application to that, goes to a rectangle, what would we do with the rest of it? What would we do?
It goes down, doesn't it?
It's a design. I think what you're saying, Chair, is
does it not ground it like
if you built on, if you essentially designed on the hard standing, it would have a greater impact on the openness of what's there. That may or may not be acceptable if the building comes down and then you've got a volume there that you can play with. But clearly, if you're encroaching all the way down, that if the chair's uncomfortable, then it might impact on openness.
Yeah.
Can I just ask on the relevant planning to 4.2, what planning permission was granted in 2015? Was that just for the buildings, or was that for the whole site? Because that's important. If we give it for the whole site now, so we say, oh, we haven't got the buildings. It's a bit of a contradiction.
Through you said the previous approval was just for the principle of residential development within the red line boundary. The council didn't apply condition that's been suggested this time.
So which was the red line boundary? Was the red line boundary just around the buildings or just around the
red line boundary is the extent of the land.
Right, okay. That's slightly changed it.
Okay. Nick, what's going to be any difference if I like to come in?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair, but it's just the necessity of a condition. It's got to pass the sort of test of conditions, and because layout is a reserved matter, and it wasn't imposed last time, I just feel there's a bit of an issue there potentially about an unnecessary condition being imposed. I mean, what you might end up with then is that we could stick to the footprint, but you'd end up with buildings that are as high as that building now, and I think there's a balance to be struck between that and obviously wider landscape impact. Yeah, we know we can't develop the whole site, but it's something that we want to come and
I
develop.
would suggest to you, you were here at the time, Whitley Willows is exactly the same as this. Whitley Willows was exactly the same as this.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, and that had massive gardens and smaller buildings. Because we had to follow the pattern, the existing pattern of the buildings. Sorry, it's entirely up to you as members whether you want to condition that or not.
Through Chair, if members would feel sort of more comfort, as a general rule, when a reserve matters is submitted, it's determined under delegated powers unless a request is put forward. What we could do if you wanted to, so members can still see the scheme coming forward, we could refer the reserve matters to yourself.
Not the reserve matters here, anyway. Yeah. Don't get that. Back to yourself. Yeah. Right, all those in favour of the application as it stands. Okay. Right, that's carried. Thank you. Yes. Item 13 is handed over to Proctor.
Members have a full report in front of them. The application is brought to subcommittee as it represents a departure from the development plan, being an application for residential development on land is currently allocated as provisional open land. Members should note that the land is included as a allocated housing site under the emerging local plan. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 5 dwellings on a part of the site that currently shows 4. It's this part of the site here, so it's that one, and this one in the corner. So that's the original layout that's been approved. What's applied for under this application are these 5 dwellings here. It is in effect an additional dwelling. The principle of residential development of the site is well established with works underway on site. Significant weight can be attached to the allocation of the site under the emerging local plan, and as such development can be supported in this instance. An additional dwelling within the site will promote the effective use of the site, boosting supply of housing, thereby meeting the requirements of Chapter 11 of the NPPF. The revised house type is considered to sit well within the site and surroundings, meeting the aims of Chapter 12 of the NPPF. The housing types are already reflected in the overall site layout. The site has been assessed to ensure that there will be no undue harm on any neighbouring occupant. The dwellings are 2-storey and of a similar scale to existing dwellings that have been approved adjacent. To consider that the local highway network can accommodate traffic movements associated with an additional dwelling and would not materially add to any matters of highway safety. To conclude, the introduction of an additional dwelling would be beneficial in terms of increasing the efficient use of the site as well as locating housing in a sustainable location. The proposals have been assessed in respect of matters of accessing highways and considered to comply with relevant policies. The proposal can be supported in this instance and as such is recommended for approval subject to Section 106 agreement in addition to conditions outlined in the report. There's nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
No speakers? Members? Councillor Bell?
Yes.
Second. Councillor Cobb? All those in favour? Application is approved. Thank you. 14 then, this is Gregory Drive, Burton.
Thank you, Chair. The application site outlines an area of scrubland located at the end of Gregory Drive. More recently cleared, although previously contained no shrubbery and trees. To the north of the site are 10 and 17 Gregory Drive, whilst the playing fields of Kirklees Middle School lie to the east, and further terrace dwellings to the west. So this is the site here, and you see on this area photo. Permission is sought for the erection of 4 detached dwellings. Plots 1 to 3 would be located on the eastern side of the site, with plot 4, the largest of the dwellings, located to the west. Each dwelling would have an integral garage with associated off-street parking provision. Access to all plots will be taken off Gregory Drive. The application is brought to committee due to the significant number of representations received. Officers consider the proposed development to be acceptable in terms of scale and design, taking into account the mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace dwellings in the vicinity of the site. There is a slight change in levels from north to south, and therefore, as the majority of the proposed dwellings would be of a true two-storey scale, their ridge heights would correspond with existing dwellings on Gregory Drive. Whereas plot 4, which is the one here, the bottom one here, that would be larger and standalone on the western part of the site. This would not appear out of scale with surrounding development due to the mixture of house types in the area. As such, officers consider the proposed development to accord with relevant policies in respect to scale and design. The development would generally accord with the recommendations set out within policy B12 of the UDP regarding spaced out buildings in relation to internal distances between the plots and also externally with existing properties, therefore providing an acceptable level of amenity for existing and adjacent and future occupiers of the site. Just go back to the site plan. As I've already said, access to the site will be taken from Gregory Drive. Although the site will provide a substantial turning head at the southern boundary here, and this is considered by officers to be a significant benefit to highway safety. In addition, it's proposed to extend the adopted highway to include the highway up to numbers 6 and 13 Gregory Drive. Due to the location of the site adjacent to Kirklees Middle School playing fields, which are over here, officers recommend that a condition is imposed should permission be granted for the submission of a noise report in order to address any impact associated with the use of the playing fields on future occupiers. And in terms of ecology and trees, suitable mitigation could be addressed by condition. Finally, details have been submitted with respect to drainage. And following consultation with the lead local flood authority, a condition is recommended for the submission of a scheme demonstrating an adequately designed circular for an effective means of drainage and surface water at the site. Subject to submission of this information, development is considered to accord with relevant policy. So to conclude, officers consider the proposed development provides an acceptable number of dwellings for the size of the site to contribute to the council's 5-year housing supply. Layout and design of the development is considered to be acceptable and highway matters have been addressed. The recommendation is for approval as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am at risk a little bit of repeating, but I've shown the applicants and the architect my speech, and it's only 2 minutes long, so I'm going to stick with it. That's all right. The site in question is unallocated land within the existing urban settlement of Kirkburton. Gregory Drive currently comes from an abrupt end with no vehicle turning area, so vehicles both large and small are therefore required to reverse back along Gregory Drive or turn within residents' driveways. Neither of these options is ideal, as it's unsafe and it can be a nuisance for the residents. So the current proposals include a good turning area at the foot of the development, would enable bin wagons and other vehicles to turn and drive away in a forward gear, therefore making the road easier to use and safer for everyone. And visitor parking is also proposed in a lay-by as you just come into the development, and currently again there is none on Gregory Drive. So there's a mix of house designs. They're all very much in keeping with the surrounding properties in terms of scale and architectural detailing, together with the use of natural stone. And the scheme includes a good amount of amenity space and sufficient parking for future occupants. And given the distances between the proposed and existing surrounding properties, together with the fact that houses would be set down within the site, as confirmed by the cross-sectional drawing there, residential amenity in terms of privacy outlook and light would be maintained. So the development would effectively round off the existing development on Gregory Drive, which presumably was always the intended purpose given the lack of turning head. And being within only 300 metres of the centre of Kirkburton, in other words a 5-minute walk, the site is in a sustainable location and again within easy walking distance of shops, public transport and other local facilities. A number of local residents have expressed their support for the development, in particular due to the turning head and visitor parking provision, because of the adoption of the remaining unadopted part of Gregory Drive and because the land is overgrown and has no current useful purpose. So we respectfully ask that this small and beneficial housing scheme is granted permission. The applicants and the architects, as I said, are here if there are any questions, and may I take this opportunity to wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Members? Take over.
You're right, as Nick said, it is a natural bit, but at the end it's probably always intended for houses. The only thing I'm surprised at now is that Alice Road is a particularly difficult road, and it's on for houses. Alice Road, everybody knows it, getting onto Alice Road, getting out of Alice Road, and the main Kirkburton Road is a bit of a nightmare. It's a really narrow road, you get a lot of traffic build up there. That's my only question is, and it is only for, I get that, but traffic is particularly bad at Alice Road and getting off the main road to Kirkburton is back as it comes to the straight angle like that. But that's my only concern.
Yeah. Through you, Chair. The sort of mention of only 4 dwellings is sort of the rule going down in terms of traffic governance. So won't be considered detrimental in that respect. So in terms of the highways, I've got no objections.
No, as I say, if there been any more than that, I think I would have been objecting, but it's probably that is particularly difficult in the early cycle. Managing around it's not easy. But on balance, I recommend approval.
Just a couple of my points, Chair. On the second one, I'm very happy one, you don't let them forget that. On the second bullet point, you mentioned children and about safety of children. I'm sure officers will have a look at that and address that point.
What's your other point?
I'm just saying that I hope we'll address that point. The other point is, look, it's quite a large site for children. Just mention trees in the against list. I just wondered whether there would be an opportunity by the developers to do some tree planting in that site.
To address that?
Yes. Through you, Chair. In terms of the construction access, we could propose a condition to restrict that to all school times. The width of Alice Road is as existing, so there's no scope really to improve that. You can't put a footway in, otherwise it'd be too much two-way traffic. It struggles as it is. And as mentioned previously, due to the low numbers, on balance would be considered acceptable in that respect.
Can we do that restriction on the deliveries?
We can look into a condition.
Construction time,
Yeah.
Condition of construction management plan.
And the transport.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually following on from that point, Councillor Burke, about the construction management plan. Having had some quite negative experiences locally about road washing and notification of major works and things like that in my work, I would hope that we would have designated contact site manager who would do their very, very best to engage with people.
That's not part of the plan anyway.
It is, but can we please send that message to them?
Could we just, while we're talking about traffic, could we just condition that the careful they come down Burton Acres Lane and down to side, not up it?
As part of the construction management plan, a routing will be agreed. So
Yeah, but no, I want them to come down it rather than trying to go through Kirkburton with that wiggling bit, because that will just block Kirkburton.
I'll make a note there.
So we come down Burton Acres Lane, come down to the site, that's going to cause less traffic. Trying to get large construction traffic through Kirkburton through that wiggling bit of the bottom. It's better than trying to get through there now.
Thank you.
We come down to make life a lot easier for everybody.
Can you put that section joint? Can I just ask what's between the two buildings? You know, the bottom joint, the big house.
Yeah.
Between the two windows, in the centre of the building, where the door is.
Oh, here.
Yeah, what's that?
Sorry.
What is it?
That's,
Is it mock children?
No.
Just
There is a detailed drawing of that.
Yeah. It's like my own says. It's not in keeping.
Not too many.
Yeah. Right, that's okay. I'm just going to say that. Okay. We've got a moment in a second.
Did the architect pick up the point about possible tree planting?
Yeah.
Yes, no problem. Part of the landscaping scheme, which will be done. We will do a full landscaping scheme for the project, including trees to enhance the site.
Thank you.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you very much. The water condition. Over in a second.
Move it to
Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. First is approved. Church walk station. Still forward. And we're not even not forget it's been recorded. This is an application for the council, so it's up to you.
You just know where we've got here.
Oh, it would not. It would have been, yeah, it would have been somebody else.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This application is brought to committee as the applicant is an elected member. The Commission is sought for the erection of a single-storey front extension, two-storey side and rear extension and detached outbuilding, as shown here. The site is now located on the UDP and the emerging local plan, and as such, the principle of development can be considered acceptable, subject to an assessment of the impact on residential and visual amenity, highway safety, and the character of the area. I'll show you. This is an aerial 3D view of Church Walk, which indicates similar extensions within the vicinity of the site. So a number of similar proposals have been approved at adjacent properties. The design and materials of the proposed extensions would generally accord with relevant policies, whilst the detached outbuilding would be located within a small part of the rear garden. Proposals would not amount to overdevelopment of the site, nor would they have detrimental impact upon residential amenity due to their scale and projection. No representations have been received as a result of site publicity, and the recommendations for approval are set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. More speakers?
Nothing to discuss. It's nothing to discuss, and this application is straightforward. I think
it's council first said it would be any other person, not an elected member, that would be delegated to officers. Councillor
and it some went because somebody else has already done it. And that's the streets, the building on the front. So I've always been a bit of a stickler for all three streets in, but as that bus has already gone, I'm quite prepared to support this application.
Can I suggest you move to vote from the chair? We've got a second row.
All those in favour? Anybody against? That's unanimous. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us this year. Fantastic Christmas and a fantastic week.
And if you like to go over there, Councillor Kirklees, you're present.
I'll give you one